Hey everyone, welcome to Magnetic and Messy, the podcast where we embrace the highs, the lows, and the absolute chaos of figuring shit out in life to step into our most authentic magnetic selves. I'm Jazzy Luchini, your host and an entrepreneur, coach, spiritual baddie, and your go-to hype girl for all things business, self-growth, and just life in your 20s. This podcast is for the ones who crave an authentic life. We'll be talking all the real raw moments in life because it's both magnetic and messy, and we're here to own it. New episodes drop when I feel like it, but hopefully bi-weekly. So make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Oh, and just a heads up, this show is unfiltered, full of spicy takes, and not always PG. So if that's not your vibe, you've been warned. Now, grab your coffee, wine, or whatever fuels your soul, and let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Magnetic and Messy. Today, we are talking about the topic of healing. We are talking about how healing isn't linear. You're not regressing, your body's just finally letting go. This is actually something I talked to someone about last night, and so it was just kind of on my mind, and it's something that I've been experiencing a lot recently, especially in the last few months. So there's a lot of times where I have just felt like amazing, like I'm finally over something, or I'm finally moving on, or I'm finally healing from a situation, and then suddenly something happens, or I get triggered, or I just have like a full-on crash, like heavy emotions, anxiety, grief is a huge one that pops up, just crying and being like, I thought I was done. Why am I breaking down right now? I felt so amazing for weeks and months, and then a little tiny trigger, and then I just explode, right? And I know how confusing and frustrating that can really be, especially when you thought you were past it, because especially when you're doing so much work, right, on healing yourself. And I think that's kind of where we fall in a trap is we think we have to be constantly healing ourselves and that we have to constantly be feeling this progression, and any sort of backtrack movement is regression and means like we didn't do it correctly, and that's just not true. This is just part of the process, and it's also just part of being human, right? It's super common. It's not failure, and it's actually a sign that your nervous system feels safe enough to process what it couldn't before. This is really what I've learned is in those moments where you finally feel safe, almost like calm, where you're like, I feel good. Your nervous system finally comes out of fight or flight and dysregulation, where it's like, okay, we've been storing up this residue underneath to protect you, but now we finally feel safe enough to let it go. So sometimes when you're crying, when you're breaking down, when you're feeling grief, sometimes if you've been, feeling like you've been healing really well, sometimes it's your nervous system finally letting go of those last remnants within you. So here's why healing's non-linear, right? True healing doesn't happen in a straight line, pretty much ever. It unfolds in spirals, waves, just lots of layers coming up, lots of things resurfacing, right? And your nervous system's primary job is survival, not optimization. So when you're in fight, flight, or freeze mode, your body can't afford to feel it all. It just can't. It can't let you feel all of it. It's too much sometimes for your body to process. So it's trying to keep you in survival mode. So it puts up these blocks. So when things start to feel better for you, your nervous system finally relaxes and it finally lets go of that fight, flight, or freeze mode. And that's when all the old pain, grief, and sort of emotion might start to surface because it finally feels safe enough to let it come up, where before it was just trying to keep you in survival mode. Because if it let it come up, you may not survive it, right? It may be overbearing and overwhelming. And this is especially common in high functioning and high achieving people, women especially, but of course men can feel these as well, gender neutral as well. So very common in high functioning and high achieving people who've pushed through pain out of necessity. And I mentioned women because it feels like women are like, I can't be emotional, right? Because over time, so many guys have been like, women are too emotional to be in this job. Women are too emotional to be in this position of power. Women are too emotional in relationships. So a lot of women, especially successful, more leader-oriented women, tend to try to hold that back because that feels like necessity to them, because they feel like if they're emotional, that makes them vulnerable, and then they'll be seen differently by their male counterparts. But this isn't an episode all about women empowerment, okay? So just remember, this isn't regression, it's a release, and release is good. You have to release to clear up that energy within you. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. So you have to release the stored up energy in order to make room for the new energy that you're trying to bring in. So try to reframe the tears, the breakdowns, the anxiety, the grief, the emotional dip as actual evidence of safety, that your nervous system and your body and your subconscious finally feel safe to have these feelings come up. Just because you're crying today doesn't mean the work didn't work, doesn't mean that you didn't heal. Say you start a new amazing relationship and old wounds from your past relationships pop up. You have triggers. And that doesn't mean that you're broken. It doesn't mean that you're not over that last relationship. It doesn't mean this new relationship's not going to work out. It just means that your body feels safe to process all of these old triggers and emotions that were maybe left over from your past relationships. And so your body's feeling safe enough to let all of that out, even though you're in this new relationship. It doesn't necessarily mean you're stuck in the past, but it just means that your body's finally feeling safe to fully let it all out and to kind of heal up. Think of it like a wound. It sounds kind of gross, but when it's like letting out pus, that's a good thing. It's letting out the pus so that it can finally heal, but that has to come out in order for it to kind of scab over and for you to fully finally heal. Or in a business sense, maybe you finally hit like a huge milestone in your business or in your professional career, and suddenly you just feel like exhausted and anxious. It doesn't mean that you're self-sabotaging. It's just your body regulating after long-term hypervigilance, long-term overfunctioning, just trying to get things done, right? Trying to hit your goal. And then finally you can let go and you just feel like all these emotions, so much exhaustion after you finally hit that because your body's finally not in this fight mode anymore. So, what's important is that you learn to ride this emotional wave, right? This is something that I'm still getting used to on a daily basis because I still feel this all the time right now. And I'm getting used to it because before I'd be like, emotions, bad. No, we don't cry. We don't do that. If I cried, I would try to hold it in and I'd be like, why am I crying? And I'd be like, no, that's a good thing. It's okay to allow yourself to process this and to just release as long as you're aware of what kind of stage you're in. Because sometimes it's not always the release stage. Sometimes it still is that you're in the middle of processing stage, but you kind of have to know the difference. One thing to do is label the moment with compassion, right? You're not broken, you're releasing. It's not a spiral, it's a setback. As long as you don't dwell in it for too long, it's okay to let it go, to let it all open up, to let yourself feel those emotions and ride that wave. Two is just support your body. This has been a huge one for me because sometimes it feels like you're going into like panic attack mode where you can't breathe, your chest feels tight, you kind of just feel like you want to die. It feels like you're dying. Sometimes that's what I've noticed it feels like, especially recently, where all of a sudden this wave of panic comes over me. And I haven't had panic attacks since maybe like before I was 20. And I started getting them a little bit recently. And I'm like, why? I feel fine. And then all of a sudden, this wave where it feels like I'm actually dying comes up. And I'm like, yeah, I remember that's what a panic attack sometimes feels like. So, learning how to support your nervous system, right? Things like breath work, just learning different breaths to help regulate your breath and your body, going on a walk. Sometimes that's easier said than done. When I'm in the middle of a panic attack, the last thing I want to do is go outside and take a walk. EFT tapping is the biggest one for me. I've talked about this in my nervous system regulation episode earlier on. I think it's episode like 11. EFT tapping, huge. I love it. It's pretty immediate for me and it can really help you release a lot of those fears and those feelings. Cold water, taking cold shower, just splashing your face with cold water. What I do is I take an ice pack and I just put it on my cheeks, and then grounding. If you want to just go outside and ground, or even just pick up something and feel it and ground yourself into that thing. And also let your body process, let your body cry, let yourself cry, let yourself shake, let yourself kind of go through the panic a little bit, move your body, don't stop the release. That's what I've learned did not help me, is when I tried to be like, no, I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to do it. After I cry, I feel so much better and it clears out so much. And then I find that things flip around because that energy is gone from within my body and my subconscious is clear from that residue. And I can finally be like, okay, I let go of that weird grief, anxiety that I was feeling, and now I feel clear and I can think again. So don't resist it. Another thing is track your emotional patterns. So Think of the emotion and think of what does it remind you of? Like, when have you felt it before? Is there any other instances where you felt that emotion before? Because sometimes you're not grieving, especially in this process where you feel like you're healing or you feel like you're better. Often you're not grieving the present moment. Of course, you're clearing the unprocessed past pain. So what really helps me is just being aware of like what I feel like this is tied to, or what where this panic or grief or anxiety is coming from, what it feels like, what I felt in a past situation. And usually that's like a trigger or something that I've been healing from or still needing to kind of work through a block from that time. And then, of course, reaffirm what's still true. Now, when you're in the moment of like releasing, I've noticed it's really, really hard to just affirm through it. Now, sometimes I can affirm through crying, like no problem. But sometimes it's not good for you. Your nervous system doesn't feel safe enough and it kind of causes more resistance. So, again, knowing when to just let yourself release versus when to just reaffirm. But usually, once I'm clear, I can affirm again. I can affirm, like, I'm safe, I am moving forward. If it's about a specific situation, you can do your affirmations around that situation, whatever it needs to be. But just remember, you're allowed to be both. You're allowed to be healing and hurting at the same time. They are not mutually exclusive. You do not have to only be one or the other. You can be expanding and grieving. You can be celebrating and still moving through hardships and shadows and triggers. Don't let people make you think that just because you're crying or you're grieving that you're backtracking or that you're not making progress. I talked about this in the last episode of how people kind of put their own opinions and their own rules on you. And if someone tries to make you feel bad because you're still processing a situation or you're releasing from a situation that happened a long time ago, doesn't matter. That's not their life. That's not their situation. They don't know what you're feeling, and you know you best. And sometimes it is like, for me, a lot of the times it is like I'm healing and I feel amazing, but there's still parts of me that are hurting. And both can be true. And that does not mean I'm backtracking. That actually means I'm human and I'm moving forward and progressing. There's no shame in duality. I always talk about this. Duality is so important because if one thing is true, if a negative is true, that means the positive can also be true, right? But the duality of being able to be both, that's what makes you human. You're human. You're feeling human emotions. You're not a robot. You're not going to be perfect all the time. Your healing journey isn't always going to look like, waking up early and going to the gym and having the perfect routine and always feeling good and being high vibe all the time. Like sometimes it looks like you're crying on the floor, you're canceling plans, you don't want to see anyone, you're isolating, and you just kind of hate the world for a second. That's okay too, right? Don't dwell in it, but let yourself feel that way, and that's okay. That does not mean that you're not magnetic. It means that you're real, right? And you're moving through it. That's what I talk about on this podcast. That's the whole point of magnetic and messy. It doesn't mean you're not magnetic and you're only messy, but these messy parts of life are what push you into the parts of life that make you magnetic, right? These are so important for you to learn about yourself and learn about your needs and learn how to be better so that you can be more magnetic. These messy parts of life are so necessary. You don't just wake up one day and all of a sudden you know how to be magnetic or you're magnetic. You work through the messy parts to understand what's going to make you magnetic through the messiness. So you're not here to just get over your pain. That's not realistic, right? You're here to integrate it. And you're here to integrate it so it no longer runs the show. It no longer runs your subconscious thoughts. Progress isn't measured by how little you feel, right? It's measured by how safe you feel letting yourself feel it all. And that's something that I really had to learn this year. That progress isn't about like me never feeling sadness or fear or grief, right? It's about how safe I feel letting it go. Like it's not going to ruin my progress. That was really, really hard for me to learn and to understand until actually very recently when I felt safe enough to let it go. And I was like, wait, I thought I was doing amazing. Why am I literally feeling everything all at once? And I realized it's because I finally felt safe to feel it. Where before, when I was pushing it down, yeah, I wasn't feeling all these emotions because I was pushing it down. I didn't feel safe at all letting it in. So next time the next emotional dip or emotional wave hits, remind yourself that this is proof that you're no longer in survival mode. This is a good thing. That's progress. And tell yourself that you trust yourself to feel and to move forward. And understand that this isn't the beginning, it's just the next layer. You're peeling back the layers. You're going to feel good, maybe feel a little wonky after. You're going to feel good, feel a little bit more wobble. You know what I mean? Like it's just layer after layer after layer, but it gets easier over time, especially as you work through it. So I hope this episode helps you all. Remember, your healing is not linear. Healing looks different for everyone. Your healing journey is not going to look the same as someone else's. And if you're still processing something from months, even years ago, that's okay. Don't let anyone make you feel bad for processing something for a long time. We're all different. We've all gone through different experiences. We all feel things very differently. And especially if you feel things deeply, it's going to take you longer than most people, and that's okay. Okay, that doesn't mean you're broken. That doesn't mean you're wrong. That doesn't mean you're dramatic. It just means you're human and you're you. So, thank you all for listening to another episode of Magnetic and Messy. I will see you all next time. All right, and that's a wrap on today's episode of Magnetic and Messy. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I seriously appreciate every single one of you for tuning in, sharing your energy, and being part of this wild journey. If you love this episode, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an update. If you want to share your positive energy with me directly, DM me over on Instagram @thejazzyva and tell me your biggest takeaway from today's episode. Remember, life can be messy, but no matter what, you are magnetic as hell. See you guys next time.